But it's roughly about that time again for a coffee and Semmler. It's about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Cheers, everybody. I know I don't have my usual mug, and I don't have the vase, but I felt like I needed that extra boost from the coffee today to get over the jet lag because we just got back from Atlanta and the major. And we come home to a very interesting article, right? It kind of sparked this video just because this is a topic that's been on my mind a lot, right? Thoughts on esports and television and the comparison between the two. And still, to this day, esports insecurities. The esports is the scenes, the industries, the orgs in the scene, their insecurities when it comes to comparing themselves to TV. Because, well, I mean, it's still there. There was an article released just last night or the day before, whatever timing. I saw it last night where ESL, and this is the title, right? ESL taps Fox TV veteran David Hill to make esports more like television. Boom. I mean, that to me right there still speaks to, the insecurities that we've been struggling with for quite some time in esports, which is basically that we're always looking up to our bigger brother, our older brother, and saying, am I doing good enough, right? Or it's like the dad or whatever kind of figure that's up here, it's like, am I good enough? Screw all that, right? I've done videos on it in the past where I've talked about my views on whether or not esports measures up to TV, and I definitely think esports measures up to TV, and in some respects, I think esports crushes TV because we have more freedom. We are part of the internet, right? We're broadcasting onto the internet. We have more freedom as far as outlets are concerned, even though orgs are obviously trying to shut that down, or at least trying to constrict that. We're starting to see now the selling of TV rights, right, or broadcasting rights of content to different platforms, whether it be Twitch, YouTube, Zubu, Hitbox, maybe Facebook, Twitter, who knows? Seems like it's opening up, right, as far as where you're going to sell your content and to which platform. That's like TV, sure. That's how the TV models are made. That's how the teams in sports tournaments, that's how basically a lot of these broadcasters make their money, is by selling rights to content. All right, but that's not the point of this. That's not the point of this video, because it feels like I could go on quite a different topics there. Like, this is such a broad topic, right? And I didn't really narrow it down for you right off the bat, so we'll try and get into that right now. Right. So when it comes to this this article right here, like, how do we make esports more like television, right? And what it seems like people are thinking of when they say that, because when I watch an esports broadcast and when I watch a sports broadcast, I find myself actually criticizing sports broadcasts more often than I do esports broadcasts these days when it comes to graphics, professionalism, camera shots, etc. In certain cases, I feel like esports are actually ahead of sports broadcasts. So that kind of goes in the sense that I feel like, we have talent like commentators, analysts that are just as good as the ones that are on TV. In some cases, some tournaments, E-League, etc., we have graphic support. We have content support that is similar to what is on TV during an actual sports broadcast. Whether that be bringing up statistics on the stream for the analysts to go over, bringing up replay packages, bringing up all these sorts of supporting things. It feels like we're on par with TV in a lot of these cases. So when somebody says, we need to make it more like TV, I'm just wondering, okay, when it comes to a live broadcast, where does this come from? During the second semifinals of the actual major, right, that happened here, I went and I watched from the actual control room, right? They had brought these trucks along, these moving like battle stations, basically, is the way I was kind of like portraying it, right? Because I mean, it's really sick. There's these massive white trucks that kind of like spread out and like manage to actually double almost in size, right, when you fully unload them. And that's where the production is actually happening, right? The director, the TD. If you missed that video, go and check it out on Room on Fire. I kind of outlined the different roles that go into a production there. So definitely go and check that out. Maybe I'll put a link. But when it comes, like, I actually watched the semifinals, right, from one of those trucks. And in that truck, right, I was trying to sit in there and think, so what is it that we're lacking? How could we beef up this broadcast? In whether that be content, supporting content, replay packages, interviews, player statistics, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, like, what's going on? And so what am I doing there? I'm sitting there and I'm asking questions, right? During breaks, during downtime, I would ask different people in the truck, so like, what are you doing? Because all these people have worked on different products for Turner, right? They've worked for sports product. They've worked for some of the biggest sports productions out there. And so I'm asking them, just like, okay, so when we're doing this, right? this esports tournament. What are you doing differently from, say, an NBA show, right? And so we were going kind of like, all right, so like, what do you bring up for the analysts, right? And so for NBA shows, right, they'll bring up a player, they'll bring up his statistics next to him, right? Similar to what they were doing, pretty much exactly what they were doing for the finals for E-League, right? Snacks goes batshit, bring up Snacks, bring up his stats, talk about that on the analyst desk. If two players in particular are going ham, bring up both players head to head. We saw that too. Replay packages, all of that, So when it comes to actually like what's going on in the production, TV, right? It doesn't really feel like we're off that far. We are definitely. What I am going to say is that we are definitely like lower on staff when it comes to actually producing that kind of supporting content, right, for the analysts. Now that's one thing where we're not at TV yet, and so there's so many different ways to go about this. Actually, I'm kind of realizing now as I'm talking about it that there's a bunch of different ways to go into this. For one, right, my main criticism in one of my tweets, right, considering esports tourneys and sports matches are already pretty similar, I'm assuming ESL means supporting content built around broadcasts. And then the following one was, considering every esports tourney org is still struggling to make a profit and most of those improvements will cost money, where to go? And that's what I mean when I say, most of these improvements cost money. It costs staff. As far as like the bare bones, we're already on par with TV, right? We have the analyst desks, right? We have the cameras to support that analyst desk. We have cameras in the stage, right? We have a lot of this that's already going on. What costs money and what's hard to get the value out, right, to justify that money, and that's where it comes down to the small little intangibles, right? How many people do you have supporting the analysts or the commentators? Compared to like sports commentary, right, where the commentators themselves have a whole team around them just handing them stats live during a match, right? We don't have that, for example. It's down to the commentators to come prepared for every match and to have their stats on hand that they've farmed themselves and managed to get that going together, right? That's in some cases provided by TV, right? In that world, right? There's a whole staff built around the commentators to help them prepare for a match, and even during the match, provide them with live updated statistics. Going into an analyst section, right? Do we have in esports? Do we have a whole team of stats men who are literally there to churn out stats and to put together graphics and to make that kind of supporting content, right? That's going to go onto the analyst desks so that guys like Thorne and Moses can break them down. Don't really feel like we have that either. How many? And this is an interesting one, right? When it comes just to like the replay packages, for example, that's all EVS machines. That's all number of cameras that you have in game. I think that Turner in their studio had like 10 cameras in game. That means like 10 separate PCs that you're pulling feeds from and that you're able to chop footage from and then put into a package, right? That's another thing that, when you're on the road, in ESL's case, for example, or DreamHack, right? Like how many in-game points of view do you have to work from to be able to pull footage from so that if somebody gets a kill, you don't miss that kill, right? If you're following all 10 people at the same time, and you even have like third person people, because that's what Turner had, for example, they had that third person view. That was a guy who was literally sitting there the entire time, who's doing third person views. His whole job was to find third person views of teams setting up, of executes, of smokes, etc. And you had an actual overall in-game director who's sitting behind him, who's processing the first person view, the third person view, and then even a guy who's delayed and getting that guy's perspective as well. And he's deciding, okay, what are we actually going to show from the in game, right? So I think what all this boils down to is manpower. And that's a tough thing to do if you're an esports company right now, because it costs a lot to get the talent. It costs a lot to get the venue. It costs a lot to get the camera people, the entire production team, lighting on the stage, all the cameras, all of this stuff costs a shitload of money. And so when you point at a camera, you say, right, well, with that camera, this is its worth because it gives us this point of view and it helps the director in X way, right? Or, that cameraman right behind the camera. Now, where we're talking about value adds, right? Like how much value does having a dedicated stats man or a whole team of dedicated stats men, right, who are providing content, churning content for the stream, like how do you quantify that value, right? And that's my main point here, is that when it comes to bare bones, I feel like we're already on par with TV. I feel like, we have the analysts, we have the commentators, we have the game, players, all of that, right? That's very much on par. What I think we're lacking in a way is all of the supporting cast that comes along with that to go into a show. the number of people you have who are actually cutting the replay packages, cutting the stingers, cutting all of that sort of stuff, right? All that in-game footage, out-of-game footage, all that sort of stuff, right? Like that adds, we saw a lot of that for E-League, and we almost take it for granted today. But E-League really went a step above, where they had all the different camera positions, and so they were able to pull from all sorts of different perspectives to make these packages, right? I mean, you go back and watch other ones, you're probably not going to get that. You're going to get a lot of just like one camera, like what you've already seen, right? You've already seen that perspective because that's what you saw on stream. But that's the only thing the guy who's cutting that package has access to, because they don't have 10 perspectives plus a third person view plus everything else, right? They don't have all those different perspectives to pull from to make that package. So that's one way that you can improve if you're, and that's what Turner did, right? That you can improve from is having all of these different perspectives to pull from to actually make that package, for example. So that makes that package better. Small, well, relatively big when it comes to actually organizing, but like small detail, right? Those packages were much better in E-League because they just had all these more cameras and all the more manpower to be able to put those packages together to make it better. When it comes to actually making supporting stats, that's another thing that that a lot of these orgs just lack completely. You know, you're doing an ESL event, for example, or even a DreamHack event, or most other Epicenter, etc. You know, you're on your own. E-League as well, for the most part, right? They've managed to set up a system that pulls data directly, right, from the game. And so that's like the average damage per round, all that. We actually very rarely saw that graphic. I don't think we saw it at all, but it was there at one point, right? It's something that was possible, but I don't think was used because I don't think it was polished enough. It wasn't quite ready yet, right? And so they weren't actually using it. But there was a possibility to show like average damage per round in a consistent way and like money spent in a consistent way and all that sort of stuff. But that's where it's like we need to go. We need to start exploring, right? How do you pull those stats? Do you have people who are competent and who know the value of those stats and who can give you a context? And then can you actually give it to the analysts in a way that will make it better, right? Will make it actually usable on stream and digestible for an audience. That's a tough thing to do because it demands a producer. It demands somebody who's going to be at the top and who knows CS to the core, who knows it through and through, and who's going to be able to sit there and actually churn all of that and say, right, this is useful, this isn't, get rid of this, blah, blah, blah. He needs to know. You need to have somebody who actually knows the game, who's running the show. And so that's very hard to do, right? They had Jason Baker, who has years of experience with CS at E-League. And so they actually had a producer who knew his shit and who knew exactly like what was good for the show, what wasn't, right? And even he was pushed to the limit because these shows are very long. I mean, that's also a big difference, right? When it comes to esports and when it comes to television, is that esports revolves around week-long events, like massive events where you have, 52 games I think we had for this major. That's a shitload of games that you have to prepare content for and that you actually have to prepare for, right? When it comes to TV, there's no comparison to TV as far as I'm concerned. When I'm over here and maybe on one night I have 2 basketball matches, and I have a whole week to prepare for those 2 basketball matches. Great. Think of all the shit that you can put together for those 2 basketball matches. And most of the time, like one basketball match that you're going to be focusing on. Think of all the shit that you can do if you have a week to prepare for that. That's like the commentators. I've been reading different perspectives from different sports commentators, right, on like what their preparation looks like. And it's like, on Monday, I'm going to prepare this. On Tuesday, this is what's going into the match. On Wednesday, maybe I'll go and talk to the teams and try and get their perspective. On Thursday, it's like, this guy has 6 days to prepare for a 2-hour show or 3-hour show. It's like, holy shit. Whereas if you're a commentator in esports, for example, and I'm taking it from my perspective, you have 1 day, basically, if that, right? Because you have all you can do to prepare leading up to the first day. But then by the second day, that's it. You've got a whole fresh new set of games, all sorts of different stats that you need to look up and prepare for. And it's all, and you're worn out from the first day already. You're going into the second day. Maybe you're going to get like 6 to 8 hours sleep, but you need to find the time for that sleep. But prep has to go into that. And also just relaxation so that you feel somewhat regenerated going into the next day, that you have some time to blow off some steam. I mean, you're trying to fit all of this into such small periods of time that, yeah, it's difficult to maintain like a super high level of prep going into a tournament just because time. That's a big difference between TV and esports. Esports is, as far as I know, like the only thing really where you're going hard for between 3 to 5 days, if not for the majors longer. This whole thing, I was gone for 10 days, right, for this major. That's a shit long period of time, right, to actually prepare for and get ready for, right, and to be on point for it for that long, because by the time you roll around to the finals, everybody is atomized because you've been working every day all day, even into the night, if you have a particularly long day, production are roasted, everybody's dragging ass, even though you're trying not to. Obviously, I'm saying like everybody's still, like trying to put out the best. Absolutely. But you got to take account, fatigue into the whole thing as well, right? So mistakes are getting made that wouldn't be made otherwise if people were fresh. There's all sorts of factors to consider when you're going into a week-long production where you've got your nose to it the entire time, right? This is just a lot more. It's like it's much more complex than just saying, well, TV does it this way, so we should be able to do it this way in esports. We can work towards that potentially, and there's definitely lessons to be learned. But when it comes down to basic production, I definitely think that esports don't have all that much to pull from TV anymore. I feel like we're on par in the key concepts and like the key things. We're on par with TV already. So where do you go to actually improve the broadcast? And I think the main concern here, and this is a concern that I've had for quite some time, right? It's like, okay, how do we build viewership? You guys may have noticed and this is definitely a point of contention, how to approach a cast. That's also a very, it's like if we want to do TV, right? Everybody knows football. It's a very simple game. You run around, you kick a ball into a net. Just what? Right? Football's pretty goddamn easy. It's just like, oh yeah, ball, net, or basketball, ball, hoop. It's a pretty simple concept to understand, right? Now then you're going to get into all the complexities.
You're streaming, by the way.
Oh.
You click streaming.
I'm streaming. Whatever. There's a local recording for this as well, right? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. So, there's like a very core concept to this, which is how do you get across all the complexities of a game like Counter-Strike to a new viewer so that they understand at least something that will keep them feeling informed and like they know something so that they'll be interested? And then how do you keep that balance so that you can get into the nitty gritty and explain and say stuff that's going to please the hardcore? And that balancing, that tightrope is super fucking hard to do. You can go one way where it's just like pure entertainment. You can go the other way where it's pure information. And then you have to try and find this happy medium the entire time. And so one thing that I was testing right with this major was actually at the beginning of the game during an eco round, I would draw out on the map certain parts of the map and name them so that in the future, perhaps if somebody was listening and they saw that and they hear me saying, okay, short on Dust 2 or catwalk on Dust 2, right? They would know, oh, okay, he's talking about this part here. Maybe I should watch that, right? And see what's going on there, right? But again, right, there's like maybe that wasn't the best way to do it. I've definitely had conversations where it's like, oh, but you're killing the hype when you take the time to explain something that basic. But at the same time, am I thinking, well, we might have 50% of our broadcast viewership right now who have never seen CS. Maybe that's going to help them understand things, and then they'll get even more hype because they feel like, oh, I get it. So not saying that I have the best way by all means, but I'm still trying to figure it out, right? I still feel like we have a lot to improve on there as far as how to get information across and how to make it an entertaining and informative broadcast without dumbing it down too much or making it too deep, right? Still trying to figure that out. Oof, man. And then, and I should be making like independent videos on all of this, but I just wanted to kind of splurge and get some of this out. And I most likely will be just making independent videos, like pinpointing on certain topics that I've covered here. But this is more of like a kind of get it all across. But when it comes to the final point that I wanted to make, which is basically, is it the tournament? Like having said all of this, right? When it comes to the broadcast on tournament day, I feel like we're doing pretty well there. Now, how do you draw in people for that broadcast if they don't even know the broadcast is happening? If they know the broadcast is happening, great. They're going to tune in, they're going to be entertained because they're going to be there to watch CS for the most part. But are we doing enough to actually build up interest around it, right? And I think, it was pretty fun. It was like a slap in the face because I got so focused on just like, oh, how do we improve the broadcast and make it better for viewers, right? How do I watch this? How do I make it so that somebody who's just tuning in is going to be interested and want to stay and learn more and all that, get excited? And I was so tunneled in on that I think it was when I was talking with the Valve devs where they were just like, well, is it the tournament organizer's responsibility to create that content? Or what about, should it be your responsibility? Should it be others' responsibilities, right? And I gripe about the Valve devs every now and again, but it is fun to talk to them because you do get different perspectives, and they do tend to look at the world like in a totally different way from we do, right? We're very passionate people in esports. We get an idea and it's in our heart, and, you really want to go and right? And the devs tend to be much more analytical and data-based driven, when they make their decisions, right? They're passionate, don't get me wrong, but they're also very much like into data and looking at hard numbers to determine what they do, right? And so it's always like a fun sort of thing to come back and talk to them, because definitely interesting to have the data, and it's going to be able to roll over and actually give you a different insight on things for sure. But sometimes they'll just blindside you with like, well, what about this? Not saying that this topic in particular is data driven, but like when I'm talking about, like which map are we picking, or why is the CZ still not, nerfed into the ground, like these sorts of things, right? Game related things. But that's the other thing, right? Where it's just like, it feels like in CS, or this is where, is it up to the tournament organizer to create the content, or should it be coming down to the industry that's built around the content, the tournaments, right? Which whether it be, media houses, companies like Drop the Bomb and Room on the Fire, companies like HLTV, even companies like ESL, should they be doing, they're trying to do 24-hour networks, right? They're trying to do that. The only problem is all they're doing is replaying matches, which is just more of the same of what's going on with tournaments. And so you're not really going to get a draw there, because all you're doing is really tuning into matches. Take ESPN, for example. It's like, yeah, okay, they'll show you the matches, but then they're nonstop with talking heads after that, and with documentaries and with replays, top 5 of the week, and like all this sort of stuff, right? They're constantly producing all this sort of stuff where somebody can tune in. If they want sports, they're going to get sports, and they're going to get invested in it, because they're going to be like, oh shit, that was a crazy shot from X player. Oh man, they're playing on Thursday. Oh shit, I gotta watch that now. I gotta tune in and see if I tune in and see it live. We don't really have very much of that going on in esports, right? Whether it's round the clock podcasts, whether it's talk shows, whether it's top 5s, top 10s, top 20s. And I'm not saying one of these is the key to draw interest to esport, or to a particular game or a particular scene, right? But it's more like the whole package. All of this sort of stuff needs to come together to keep people interested and keep people hype. And that's where I wonder, right? Like, do we have, I don't think we have nearly enough of that sort of content going on the sidelines that generates hype for the big tournament. So it's like a shared responsibility almost, where tournament organizers, yes, they should be creating the content. They should be doing their stuff, which is basically putting on the tournaments. But it seems like we do need to step up on the sidelines and start creating more content as well, and get people more interested and more invested in the storylines, right? To use a nice catchphrase there. But we need to step up around it as well to create the content that's going to go towards these tournaments, right? So, it's such a broad thing, but touched on a bunch of different things. I'll probably break it down and cover it in multiple videos. But just to get some thoughts out there, to boil it all down, TLDR, interesting to see what this person will do for ESL. ESL, whose entire model is built on just creating tournaments, and as many tournaments as possible that they can churn out there. So when it comes to raising standards, I'm going to be very interested to see how he approaches it, because when it comes down to just the tournament show itself, for some of the reasons that I've outlined, I think that's going to be where he has to focus. So we'll see. Thanks all. See you next time.